Okay, good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome to the Urban Ecology Center's Backyard Naturalists annual shorts episode. My name is Tim, and I'll be the host for the first mini episode, and then I'm going to hand it off to 5 additional amazing human hosts as we cover a vast array of topics in about 50 minutes. This means we each have exactly 9 minutes, so I'm going to get started in a short I'm calling The Altruist, right after I give a huge thanks to our Backyard Naturalist subscriber community. Thank you so much for your support that keeps this program running now into its 6th season. And after a quick reminder that the next installment of the Green Spaces Familiar Faces will be Saturday, January 25th, as Eddie Daniel will take us to one of his favorite stretches of the Menominee Valley. And after I remind you that I'd love to have you join me for the winter ecology course I'll be teaching in February at the brand new to us Washington Park branch, and you can sign up right now on the website for this 4-week course. This first short is a quick look at the word and the concept of altruism. We're going to look at it both through a social and an ecological lens. So socially, altruism can be defined as the belief in or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others. Ecologically, we'll look at it as a behavior of an animal that benefits another at its own expense. Either way, we're going to get to the bottom of the question, is there a truly unselfish act? Because according to Immanuel Kant, the performer of the act cannot get anything out of it in pure altruism. So we'll start with the biological side, natural selection. In order for any trait, a behavior, and adaptation to survive, to be adaptive, to spread, it has to result in the bearer of that trait surviving and reproducing to a greater extent relative to non-bearers of the trait. If the behavior or adaptation results in more kids, it will spread throughout the population. If it's not related to survival and reproduction, it may randomly spread or go extinct. If it affects survival and reproduction in a negative way, it will be likely lost from the gene pool, all depending on the extent of the effect. This is purely from the biological lens. So any altruistic behavior in this sense has very little chance of sticking around, especially one that causes harm to the bearer. So if the nursery rhyme Rockabye Baby, if a baby were truly stuck in a tree, would you try and save it? Through the natural selection argument, probably not, because if you got hurt or you died in the act, that would affect your survival and reproduction. So little or no chance of seeing altruism in that lens. But all adaptations are rooted in our genes. So Dawkins wrote the book The Selfish Gene and argued that our bodies are merely a vehicle for genes. And so to truly look at whether a behavior is adaptive or altruistic, we have to look at the genetic level. So that brings us an interesting new way of looking at the baby in the tree. If that baby is mine, that baby shares half of my genes. So saving that baby might increase the spread of my genes, particularly the gene that's telling me, hey, save that baby. So the baby saving behavior then might spread in the population. And then this leads to a really fun world of game theory. If you ever take ecology courses, so now you can look at that baby and I'm like, oh, there's a baby stuck in a tree. Will I save it? That depends on how closely related that baby is to me. So I'm going to do a cost-benefit ratio analysis now. How dangerous is climbing that tree? If it's super dangerous, I might only save that baby if it's mine or a sibling's, because those are the relatives that share half of my genes. We're talking, again, this is just from a biology side. Human sociology and everything takes it way different levels. So I might risk a lot to save a child of mine, a brother or sister. If I'm going to go to a niece or a nephew or a cousin, God forbid, or second cousin, then probably not unless that risk level comes way down. So if I'm going to go to the niece or nephew level, the grandchild level, 25% of my genes, 12% of my genes, that the percent of genes that we share gets less and less. So it's kind of like, I might do this altruistic behavior. but it depends on how closely related. So that's the genetic side of things. Um, then you have, why when bees sting you, they die. That's the ultimate sacrifice at the expense of the colony, or they're sacrificing themselves to save that colony, because according to that genetic level, that entire colony is their siblings or half siblings. So an altruistic trait then can come about in this lens. It can be super adaptive if you're talking about genes spreading and helping relatives who share your genes. And we see this all the time in nature. For the most part, it's animals sacrificing themselves for the benefit of their close family. Also, kin selection is where this kind of rears its the case, but this isn't always the case in vampire bats. If one individual is unsuccessful getting a blood meal in the night, they come back hungry. Another successful bat will share some of their meal with the unsuccessful bat, and this will happen even if the individuals are not related to each other. So then it takes, why would you perform a behavior that's not beneficial to you to help save somebody that's not related? And this really gets into a couple of concepts. Reciprocal altruism. So if I help you tonight, you might help me tomorrow. So then it is still benefiting you, but there's an adaptive benefit to this behavior. So it's not, it's actually a selfish act to be helping a friend in that respect. This also brings about group selection, natural selection at the group level, which causes fights among ecologists. But the idea that individuals will sacrifice themselves so that the group can survive, the community can survive. And we talked about lemmings and how Disney started this urban myth that if food becomes too scarce for lemmings, they undergo this mass sacrifice, all just throwing themselves in the ocean for the good of the community so that everybody doesn't starve and enough of them can kind of continue forward. And then humans bring this altruism game to an entirely new level, at least to our own awareness. We're probably not alone. In fact, you see signs, you see stories of other animals doing this, but humans make a decision often not to reproduce. So that kind of throws away that natural selection gene theory. And then you can get a lot closer to this pure idea of altruism. So if you make a donation, there's an entire Friends episode where they talk about whether donating to PBS is a truly unselfish act. For some who donate, they want to be seen donating. They want others to know that they donated because they want to look good and moral and selfless. So if you give a gift, you want that person to know that gift came from you. There's a couple things at play. There's a social status, like look how good I am by doing this. You want others to know you're a good person, or you just want the recipient to know the really good thing you did for them. So absolutely generous. I'm not questioning that, but there is something in it for the giver. So not completely unselfish. And then anonymous donations, helping someone who have no idea that you were the person that did that, that is pretty common too. Still very generous. MRI scans shown that these anonymous acts of kindness release endorphins in your brain, pleasure centers. So again, by the purest definition, you feel good. You do get something out of it. You get those warm fuzzies. So there is something in it for you. And in humans, just like in vampire bats, we are more likely to perform a selfless act helping someone else if we think that a benefit may come to us in the future. So you help your friend dig their car out of the driveway. You know that if you get stuck, somebody will help you too. This is a gray area. All these factors overlap, but it feels good to help people in need without that reciprocity as well. So Emil Durkheim has a very interesting view of altruism. He says it's a social construct to control people. So if from the strictly Darwin's natural selection, we'd have no problem killing each other for our own benefit. Fewer humans means more resources for me and my family. So altruism does conform to social standards and somewhat controls our behavior for the benefit of everyone. If I'm about to perform a morally questionable act, I might not do it if I know others will see me or find out, as dark as that sounds. So altruism shouldn't exist. It's the opposite of that rational self-interest. It puts the needs of the individual against the needs of society. However, in society, by putting the needs of the group over the individual, makes it easier for totalitarian governments. So it's kind of it's altruistic to pay taxes and not demand that everyone benefits the same. In communities, some need more help than others. Strong communities benefit everyone. So in a little bit of a soapboxy way, that's altruism can be used for good and evil. So at the end of the day, it might be impossible to find a truly altruistic trait in humans and non-humans. You find examples of different species helping each other all the time. No apparent benefit to themselves. Hippos protecting deer, dolphins helping sailors. For me, I'm totally okay with the warm fuzziness being the reward. Helping others feels good. Being helped feels good. Just reading about people and animals helping each other feels good, can evoke strong emotions. So instead of finding a truly altruistic act, I'm okay with endorphins and strong relationships and strong communities and just straight up goodness being the reward for acts of kindness. We live longer, we live happier, and we live better. So long, everybody, especially you, Bob. I am now going to pass it to Amanda to do the next mini and stop sharing my screen. Oh. That is awesome.
I have to say that I can't take credit for this. Was posted a while ago on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's social media. So, but it's on brand for us. I had to use. All right. So I am going to talk to you about gulls today. And if you think I'm here to teach you how to identify gulls, well, you're wrong. All gulls are gulls. And this might never be a skill that I learned in my career or lifetime. Um, Today, we're more going to talk about gulls as a group and how they're underappreciated. Um, so gulls, locally known as seagulls, are seabirds of a subfamily called Larinae. They're most closely related to terns and skimmers. And within this Larinae subfamily, there are 11 genera and 54 living species. Laris, which, if you're a birder, you're probably familiar with. These are our white-headed gulls. That's going to be our largest group. They, being seabirds, are kind of unique in that they're among the more coastal of seabirds. They can be found inland along the coast or a short way offshore. They're rarely found many, many miles offshore like other seabirds. Um, and they're ground nesting birds. They're monogamous. And they form these large colonies where they will nest on cliffs, on islands, or even on rooftops in urban spaces. They have very complex methods of communication and a very well-developed social structure, which can include things like divorce and same-sex pairing. And shout out to Claire, who's actually here today. You can watch her episode, but I'm a seagull, to learn more about uh, same-sex pairings and research on seagulls. But this is their fight stance. This is one of their mating displays. This is them working together to mob a hawk. They have a very complex social dynamic. They are piscivores, so they eat a lot of fish, as well as being carnivores. But they will take live food, including things like crustaceans and mollusks and fish. But of course, they will also scavenge opportunistically. Um, they're fun because they can, like a snake, can essentially unhinge their jaw and fit a wide variety of size prey in their mouths, including things like squirrels and sea stars, rats, rabbits, etc. Of all the seabirds, they are probably the least specialized in terms of their diet, as well as their habitat, which allows them to thrive in a variety of environments, including very highly urbanized areas. And of course, they're often considered to be pests, but it's also been shown that gulls are very resourceful and inquisitive and intelligent. Many gulls have learned that they can drop hard-shelled mollusks onto rocks below to break them open. And herring gulls have even been observed using pieces of bread to bait and catch goldfish. They have also learned that they can do this little dance, foot stomping action that will stir up food in shallow water, but also on land will sound like rain, which can bring worms to the surface for a quick and easy meal. Much like crows and ravens, gulls uh, never forget a face. Researchers who work on gulls often have to wear helmets or masks to protect themselves from getting dive bombed when they're out with the gulls. And of course, many have learned that people walking away from their towels on the beach often have food that they can find, or some gulls even will walk into a convenience store and steal a bag of chips. And a study a couple years ago showed that gulls will travel pretty far in search of food, easy food. Um, these are the Channel Islands off the coast of Southern California. Some of the islands are between, the islands themselves are between 23 to 70 miles off the coast. And what they found, putting GPS tag on some of these gulls, they've learned that many of them are making very long journeys back to mainland California and traveling to places like In-N-Out Burger and hanging out in their parking lots and eating their trash. This isn't necessarily evidence of preference, but might be an indication of something that's happening with many, many seabirds across the board where there's just not enough food available to them. Fisheries have crashed. This is an older graph, but in 2003, 32% of stocks for the world's fisheries had collapsed. Many are overexploited or fully exploited. And there's just a lot of competition between individuals of varying seabird species, as well as things like marine mammals, for fish that just aren't there. And so sometimes you got to go and get some fries. But I'll turn it over now to, I believe, Cassie. And just end reminding you that gulls are funny little guys who may steal your French fries, but are just trying to make it work out there.
I can't unsee that picture of the gull like swallowing such a big animal. That's crazy.
Yep. Wow.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Yes.
And can you see what we're working with today?
Yes.
Or did you just see a cute little flash of my current dog?
And did just see adorable flash.
Okay. I'm going to take just a second to get my screen a little bit more organized. But I'm Cassie Bauer. I serve as our community programs director at the Urban Ecology Center. And when I am not playing and working at the Urban Ecology Center, I'm oftentimes found jibber jabbering about dogs. So I would love to talk to you a little bit today about fostering animals and how that has an impact on our environment and our communities. So give me one more time a yes, I can see the appropriate screen.
Looks great.
Okay, awesome. So I want to start with an adorable picture, and I don't know how many of our viewers today are pet owners of their own, but I think we've all probably heard about the number of companion animals that end up in animal shelters in the US each year. It's the number lately is 6.3 million, and statistics show that there are lots and lots of shelters nationwide that have to lean into culling those animals or euthanasia. So choosing to adopt from those shelters obviously can not just save a life, but it also means that fewer cats and dogs are coming from puppy mills or from breeders that might have practices that aren't really in line with maybe kindness towards other sentient beings. So when we are working with shelters, whether it's through fostering, meaning taking over the temporary care of a companion animal, or adoption, we're really making not just an impact on our hearts and in these critters' hearts, but also on our environment. So the number one reason to work with shelters and like how fostering can benefit is actually population control. So there's a lovely little infographic here that I might use to convince a human who thinks it might be cruel to remove the reproductive abilities of a companion animal. However, there are lots of benefits to the creature themselves, and many times the animal shelters that are working to bring animals into care that are strays, their number one goal is to reduce the number of unwanted litters. We've probably all heard the thought of like, you want to work yourself out of a job. Yep, that's the goal at an animal shelter, is to really try to bring in animals that they can be altered to not create more litters. This means when we do have animals out there that can continue to reproduce, there are higher populations that lead to more disease, malnutrition, and it is incredible how many litters a cat or a dog can have in a year. Generally, cats can reproduce every 3 months. Dogs can reproduce every 4 months, and that's a lot of critters coming out into our communities. Here's just a little bit more information on like, holy cats, look at literally all the cats and dogs that could be out and about in natural spaces. If you're a cat owner out there and your cat longs to go outdoors, you've probably encountered several articles, maybe even engaged in conversation about how detrimental cats can be to our songbird populations. And if you're a dog owner, you've probably experienced and heard a little bit about poo, which we will get to here in just a second. So we've probably all heard that humans have ecological footprints. Our animals also have carbon paw prints, actually. So the number one contributor to that would be the production of pet food. So, for example, there are 64 million tons of carbon dioxide that are dumped into our atmosphere per year from the production of pet food. In addition to that, like I said, dogs and cats produce waste that's equivalent to the same amount of garbage produced by 6.6 million people. Not to mention that we love to give our creatures toys for enrichment, sometimes to give us a little bit of brain space too, so they can stay busy. And that actually generates 40,000 tons of waste each year, because if any critter is like mine, your stuffies do not survive long in the household. This image here is just kind of showing, if you have a cat, the average CO2 emissions that come from a cat over their lifetime, a dog, like medium-sized dog, and then a very large breed dog. So I want to lean into maybe some of the benefits to humans for fostering a critter. I love that Tim talked about altruism and how we're kind of connected in a way of the psychology and the mental health benefits of helping others, including other living beings and creatures. So aside from saving lives and providing a stable environment for companion animals to learn from, the companionship that humans get from an animal bond is can be tied to reduced symptoms of anxiety and depression. Pets can actually help you meet people. Sounds super cliche. We've probably all seen a movie where a dog gets wrapped around a stranger's legs, and 45 minutes later, they're planning a wedding. But they can really be social lubricants, if you will, and offer like social support. Many people now have emotional support animals, so they can provide kind of a calming space, a calming environment, and help individuals kind of heal from any of the trauma that they have maybe experienced in their life too. And when you foster an animal, again, taking over the temporary care and enrichment of a creature, you're actually maybe helping yourself kind of prepare for your own pet. So if you're not quite ready to become a turtle mom or a dog mom or a cat lady, you can do it temporarily and see if that is a fit for your home and your lifestyle, while also helping to keep our animal shelters at lower levels so they can really treat the care and provide the rehabilitation needed to our creatures in the most need. I promised poo, we are at poo. So it's not cool to leave your stool. And the impacts of that on the environment are undeniable. We've probably all been on a lovely nature walk and stepped in it, or came upon it. And the amount as quantified in 2023, there was a whopping 5 million tons of solids from our pets. If all cat and dog poop were to be thrown in the trash, it'd be roughly the same amount of garbage that's produced by the entire population of the state of Massachusetts. So that's a lot. That's annually. And leaving it out in the environment can introduce all sorts of different diseases, vectors. It can impact our native wildlife populations, and it's just not cool to leave your stool. There are a number of local rescues. This is kind of where I want to leave you. And maybe at the end of our episode, I can share my information if you are ever interested in learning more about fostering. I'd be happy to talk with you. I'd be happy to get you connected to local rescues. This is me, Little Miss Adopt and Don't Shop. There are many, many reasons why. And if you care for our planet, it might just be something to add to your bucket list in 2025.
Thank you, Cassie. That was fantastic. Thank you, Amanda. I just cleared out my parents' attic and came across all my Little Miss books. I had a lot. I had a whole box of them. They're gone now. But that was a cool reminder and a fantastic topic. So now we're gonna turn it over to one of my favorite humans, a master storyteller, both in particularly in written word, a prolific author, and also a longtime supporter of the Urban Ecology Center and the Backyard Naturalist. We've been on many adventures together. So take it away, Carolyn Washburn.
And I'm sorry I don't have any visuals other than my face, so you all can close your eyes and just listen. So this is I don't know if it's a medical topic or, well, it's about two human characteristics. I have kind of a superpower. I remember faces. In fact, it was interesting, Amanda, when you said gulls never forget a face. Maybe I have some gull in my background. I don't know. And then it's opposite, which is a condition called prosopagnosia, which is the common term is face blindness. So, and this is an article that was published last spring in my college alumni magazine, but I've taken out the references to the college. I went to Wellesley College in Massachusetts, still women, yeah. Okay, so I call this I Never Forget a Face, period. I wish I could, period. When it was published, it was called Haven't I Seen You Somewhere? The woman behind the counter at the Arizona drugstore looked familiar. Within 2 seconds, I remembered her, Lynn. I would have recognized her anyway without her name tag. You used to work at the Walgreens in Shorewood, I said. I thought she would be impressed. Instead, she said, yes, I did. One day I threw out my bag shoveling snow and I said to my husband, honey, I'm moving to Arizona to live near mom and I'm taking the dog. You can either come with me or not. We've been here 9 years. We love it. How can you stand that terrible Wisconsin weather? Not for me, no siree. I got no huzzas from Lynn, no siree, no, wow, you have a good memory, or even nice to see you again. I'm what's called a super recognizer, able to identify someone, often out of context, even if I haven't seen them for 10, 20, or even 30 years. We super recognizers are only about 1 to 2% of the population, and we can remember 80% of the faces we have seen, compared with 20% by the general population. There are some uber super recognizers who can recognize a face after having seen it only once, or when seeing only part of a face. I'm good, but not that good. I got hooked on faces my first year at college when I practically memorized all 435 of us women in the freshman directory. We were called freshmen then, not first year students, which listed everyone's photo, hometown, and dorm. To this day, I can picture Jean's smooth brown bob, Ellie's sophisticated sweater and pearls, and Stephanie's shy smile. Our senior yearbook provided me with many hours of face-gazing fascination. This ability wins me popularity contests only at high school and college reunions, where attendees expect to run into people they haven't seen for a long time. My former classmates are honored that I remember them. More typically, however, here's how these encounters go. I approach someone with a warm smile of recognition, saying something like, oh, Bob, I remember you from that conference in Minneapolis. We ditched the boring workshops for the bar. Or, hi, Jane, you're Marge's sister and used to date Jim, right? The person looks at me blankly or like I'm creepy. So I reintroduce myself. Sometimes they respond positively. More often they mumble something and sidle away. As a result, I've learned not to approach unless someone shows a flicker of recognition. Then I give my name and remind them of where we met. On the plus side, my ability makes it easy to dodge people I'd rather not talk to. It has also led to some wonderful reconnections. I reestablished a working relationship with a nonprofit agency director I'd written grants for 20 years earlier. We crossed paths in Riverside Park when she was walking her dog, and I recognized her immediately. She did clean up the poop when she was walking her dog, and I recognized her immediately, even though she was 30 pounds heavier and her hair had turned gray. Recently at a restaurant, I noticed a former university colleague whom I hadn't seen in maybe 15 years. I didn't walk over to say hi because I'd learned my lesson. I did, though, email him later saying I'd seen him and reminding him of our connection. He suggested getting coffee, and a wonderful friendship has ensued. Being a super recognizer is the opposite of having prosopagnosia, Google it, commonly called face blindness, found in an estimated 2.5% of the population. People with severe cases don't recognize the faces of loved ones or close friends, sometimes not even their own. Some of the famous people with face blindness are the late neurologist Oliver Sacks, the actor Brad Pitt, and primatologist Jane Goodall. My friend Dave, a retired physics professor, has a relatively mild case, but even that has been problematic. He says, I've been told by colleagues and students that I'm cold and standoffish, but it's because I don't recognize people, even people I've interacted with for years. Dave has tried all sorts of coping strategies, such as memorizing distinguishing facial features. He says it's exhausting and mostly it doesn't work. I should be grateful for my ability, which I can choose to use or not. I do, though, think my brain is clogged with too much information. It's a huge database of all those faces. Free up that brain, I tell myself, and you could be finding a cure for cancer, or the key to reducing climate change, or a path to world peace. I wish, though, that I could figure out a way to monetize my talent, but without success so far. If you have a suggestion, let's Zoom. Then I can remember your face, too. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. What a wonderful story.
Thank you.
Interesting. Okay, I think now we're ready to hand it off to another former speaker in the series and former summer staff at the Urban Ecology Center, Emma Nickelbein.
Emma Nickelbein, can everyone see that?
I can see the whole thing. I can see the whole screen.
Sweet. I'll just start from the beginning. So, hi, some of you probably remember me. I am a PhD student at UWM studying the arboreal humanities. So basically how trees interact with humans. My specialty is literature. But today I'm bringing to you something that is not quite a tree, but interacts with trees really, really closely. So that is mistletoe. It's a really weird plant, and since we just kind of came out of the holidays, it seemed like a really good thing to talk about because it's weird. And some of the interactions here are, I think, really cool to talk about. So first thing we got to know about mistletoe is that it is a parasitic plant. So basically, it lives by kind of connecting itself to a tree and sucking out water, nutrients, stuff like that from its host. So most mistletoes, and there's a lot of different kinds, are obligate hemiparasitic plants, which basically means they're half parasites. So mistletoes that have their own leaves and can photosynthesize on their own, they don't need to take all their nutrients from their host. They just take around half. So that's why they're called hemiparasites. And the way that they do this is with a structure called a haustorium, which is basically roots, but roots that go into wood. So you can kind of see in this little photo here, sort of what that looks like. It basically worms its way into the wood and attaches itself really securely. Now, there are other kinds of mistletoes that are full parasites. So they don't really have leaf structures, they can't photosynthesize. So they take everything they need from their host tree. And as a result, that host tree usually has like a shorter lifespan than a tree that's infested with a hemiparasitic variety. Um, so, one of the things that I think people don't know is that there are more than 1,300 species of mistletoe worldwide. And they can sometimes be really different from each other. So the one we see most often, the one that's related to the holidays, is European mistletoe. And that's the one I showed on the first slide with the little white berries. That's the one that people hang up at Christmas time, and then you're supposed to kiss underneath it. But we've actually got between 60 and 70 native mistletoe species in Wisconsin, including the eastern dwarf mistletoe, which is the top left picture here, which you can see looks very different from what we would expect mistletoe to look like. And that's because that is a fully parasitic variety. So you can see it doesn't have green leaves, doesn't have chlorophyll. It takes everything it needs from its host tree. And one of the things I think is interesting about mistletoe is it is one of the causes for those witch's broom structures that you might see in the branches of trees. A lot of times it's kind of tricky to see why a witch's broom appears in a particular tree. But basically, it's kind of like the tree's immune response. So if it's got something like mistletoe or a fungus or like a virus, the tree will essentially create a bunch of wood, a bunch of sticks to try to isolate that problem to that one little area. And that's how we get things like witch's brooms. So, there's a picture of that as well. Mistletoe can be one of those um, causes. Okay, so I've just got a few fun facts on this slide of some things that I found out about mistletoe as part of my research that I think are just really interesting. So one of the things that we can think about is that mistletoe is really toxic to humans. Humans should not eat it. Don't eat the leaves. Don't eat the berries. But if we're thinking about animals and especially birds, those leaves and berries are really important food sources. So in some ecosystems, mistletoe actually functions as a keystone species, which I've talked about before. And it basically like provides really important food for um, birds in particular. And birds, because of that reason, are actually crucial to the life cycles of a lot of mistletoe. So the plant basically relies on its berries to carry its seeds. And when a bird eats that berry, it creates, for lack of a better way to say it, like sticky droppings. So when the bird poops, those droppings fall, hopefully for the mistletoe, on tree branches, and then they stick there, and that's how a new infestation of mistletoe can begin. Right, so the birds are often really crucial in the process of mistletoe getting from one tree to another tree. Um, there are some other varieties, like the dwarf mistletoes, that take a little bit of a different approach. Basically, they explode their seeds off into the world. And they do this by using water pressure. So they can build water pressure inside their fruits. And then when the time is right, when the fruit is ready, they use this water pressure basically to explode the fruit and shoot the seeds outward in all directions. And I guess in some cases, those seeds can travel as much as 50 feet away from the original plant. And pretty similarly to the bird droppings, they are sticky. So they stick onto the surfaces of other trees. And that's how we get new mistletoe. So it's interesting to think about them because on the one hand, they are like taking their resources from the tree, and the tree does often die, especially if, like in this photo, there's like a lot of mistletoe hanging out on that tree, multiple plants. They will kill that tree, and depending on how many there are, they will do it a lot faster. But they're still contributing to the ecosystem. And as we know, dead trees are sometimes just as valuable to other plants and animals as living trees. So seeing kind of this unique relationship of parasitism that still ends up really contributing to the ecosystem, I think is pretty cool. And because I'm also in arboreal humanities, I looked into why basically we kiss under the mistletoe, why that's a tradition that we have. And it turns out that lots of cultures, ranging from ancient Greece to now, have had some sort of tradition around mistletoe. And we see it popping up at a lot of key moments and holidays. So just really briefly, I do want to mention a couple of these because some of them are kind of fun. So in ancient Greece is when we first see mistletoe kind of popping up as a fertility symbol. And we think that this is related to the fact that mistletoe, a lot of varieties don't lose their leaves in the wintertime. So they'll stay green, and when everything else is losing their leaves and everything else is kind of brown and sad, mistletoe is still green. So we think that that's kind of where that tradition started to come from. And it moved to ancient Rome, and it was actually used in Saturnalia, right, the festival of Saturn. And kissing under the mistletoe started all the way back then. That was when that tradition kind of gained popularity. The Druids had various rituals involving mistletoe, the most important of which was the ritual of oak and mistletoe. They similarly believed that there were like fertility benefits to ingesting mistletoe, which is interesting now that we know it's toxic. But, we've got them kind of in the mix here. The Norse gave mistletoe a lot of importance in their mythology. So there's a really crazy story about Loki and some of his mischief. He actually kills someone using mistletoe, but not poison. He just like throws it at him and he dies. And finally, we've got the English coming in. Around the Victorian era, mistletoe really kind of came up during the holidays. And basically a mixture of all these other things. It was decided that kissing under the mistletoe meant that you were going to marry that person, or if you were already together, you would make up with that person and stop fighting about whatever you were fighting about at the time. So yeah, that's just a really brief little intro to mistletoe. And yeah, I think it's a pretty cool plant.
Thanks so much, Emma. That was fantastic. We're super lucky to be joined by our final speaker, Yesenia. And I'm going to ripped herself out of a meeting in order to join us. So super, super lucky and grateful. So I'm going to quick make you co-host so you can share. Oh, you're already doing it. Never mind. Don't need to. Take it away, Yesenia.
Good morning, y'all. Can you hear me?
Can. Sound great.
Cool. All right. Well, I realized that if I'm in presenter mode, I can't see my notes. So maybe I'll just do this. And you'll be reading my notes with me. So good morning. My name is Yesenia, she, her pronouns, and I am the branch director over at the Valley. Today, I would love to talk to you about a book. So I want to be very specific. Most of the things that I'm sharing on here come specifically from this book published in 2015, I believe, and revised in 2016. So just a little FYI. We'll talk a little bit about decolonization. And so I did want to have like a slight, maybe like trigger warning. Just so y'all know, I'll briefly talk about just colonization. And it's important to acknowledge how violent it was. So I do want to share that there might be some sensitive. I'll just touch on a sensitive topic briefly. But yeah, so this book has changed a lot for me. I started reading this back in undergrad, and I just want to talk about the book. I really love the book. So the authors are Catriona and Luz. And here, essentially, what I love about this book is that it's not just a cooking book, but it's not a history book, but it's like a combination of both, and also talking about food as medicine. And so Catriona, who is seen here on the left, she also passed away last year. So just throwing out a honor to her. She notes that when her grandmother moved away from her children, she had gone through a divorce. Her children, so not Catriona's children, but her father and his siblings, started eating some of the cheaper foods. So canned foods, fast foods, and most of them developed type 2 diabetes. So she had been she was aware of some of the health issues related to diet that were in her family. And then for Luz, who's her partner and co-author of this book, she got breast cancer at one point in her life, and she was shocked because throughout most of her life, she had been vegetarian so 15 years of her life, she had been vegetarian. And this kind of went against everything that she had heard about vegetarianism, right? So both of them, it threw both of them into this research, actual research, not just Googling, which is what I do. So they actually started researching, and they found that there were diseases and health concerns tied to their diets, and that they were actually lower in Central America, in more rural, I should say that, in more rural parts of Central America. And as people acculturated to US culture, right, when they migrated here, their health risk went up. And it's really interesting that even learning English was a factor in increasing their possibility of having a health issue. So this idea of like acculturation and just America, and to me that's tied to like capitalism, the patriarchy, and a lot of these things. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about the authors. So one of the things, I really love this quote. What if the diet of rural Mexico and Central America, a diet that is based in ancestral and plant-based, so beans, corn, squash, wild greens, nopales, fresh fruit, nuts, and seeds, was protecting folk from the diseases associated with life in the US, such as diabetes, heart disease, and some cancers. And in the book, there's this really beautiful story of this, you know what? I don't think I have time. I don't think I have time. Let's just go to the next thing. Read the book is what I'm trying to say. So the next thing that I want to talk about, decolonization. What is it? So just to start off, the Americas have 500 years of colonization plus. This essentially, decolonization is the transfer of land from native people to Europeans, and it includes the death of millions of indigenous people, rape of native women, the violent suppression of indigenous languages, religions, and cultures. And along with culture, I also put food in there, and they do too. So also acknowledging, big part of decolonizing is acknowledging that indigenous communities have held and continue holding knowledge, culture, and ways of being in the world that are a healthier relationship with, that have help us have a healthier relationship with each other and all of the beings living and non-living in the world. So colonization is also, we need to take a community-centered approach to decolonization. So one thing that I love about this book is that they're not saying you do it on your own. Here's the things that you can do. It's how are you going to help your community decolonize by starting with yourself. And also part of decolonization is acknowledging that the US and Canadian governments, among many other governments, and these corporations are displacing, polluting lands, waterways, threatening ancestral seeds, which I didn't even know that there were seed patents. Food for profit system, right? That's capitalism. So decolonization also includes putting I wrote this, they did not say this, but a middle finger to the patriarchy. And just as important, a connection to our ancestors as part of decolonizing. And I don't know why it's not showing, oh, because it's in the next one. Sorry, I'm not kind of running through this, but like I love this ad at the bottom that says "Eat like a man," and it has this man, grabbing this manly piece of meat, because that's part of colonization, viewing meat and animals as something that we consume, and that's for us, and that makes us strong when we kill other beings, right? So the book touches on some of these things that I'm just kind of running through right now. So how do we decolonize? And I love that this book doesn't necessarily give me one specific answer. It actually says there's so many different ways to decolonize, and you have to choose whatever works for you. So in my example, I'm a Chicana. That's the identity that I most associate with, and that's Mexican American, I guess to put it in a different term. And what I love about the examples that they give is that they're saying decolonize in the way that works for you. So for example, there's an example of eating whole wheat tortillas instead of flour tortillas. And I guess someone could argue, but flour tortillas are the traditional way that you eat tortillas. And it's like, actually, flour tortillas happened because of colonization. One thing that I was shocked by too is that cilantro, one of those greens that people get on their tacos, actually is not native to Central America or Mexico. So even, right, there's like foods that we eat that weren't a part of our ancestors' diet, but they become such an ingrained part of our lifestyle, right? That cilantro is life for me. I have to have cilantro with my tacos, even though that's not traditional, that's not ancestral. So how do you decolonize? You kind of choose what works for you is the message that I got. And another way to decolonize for me is to enjoy my food, to cook in community, to feed other people, to do it with love, to be less wasteful, take my time when I'm cooking, ask other people, especially my elders, to teach me and to reclaim knowledge of food. So essentially, there's what I'm saying, there's no one way to decolonize. There's many, many different ways to decolonize, and you choose what works for you, what works for your folk. Um, this was probably one of the like condensed ways to explain what's a colonized diet versus a decolonized diet. And maybe I can send this over to Tim to share later. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about my own experience because like I said, this book has changed my life and I want to share. So I attended this chat a couple of months ago about how to eat more local, right? Because that is what I understood. Part of decolonizing is to eat local foods and not have to um, hurt this earth by getting bananas from thousands of miles away, right? So I want to tell you that I went to Outpost in Bayview, and I have never been sadder in my life. So you can see the Outpost on the right. And I say that I was so sad because even though I was eating, I guess, more local, these weren't foods that I grew up eating. You know, I grew up eating jicama, I grew up eating piña, I grew up eating a lot of veggies that I can't even find at Outpost. And so on the left, I have Cermak, and this is a glimpse of their fruit and produce. Fresh fruit and produce made up maybe a fourth, a fifth of the store, and at Cermak, it makes at least a third of the store. So part of when I talk about decolonization, right? Had I just done the like eat local track, I would have been so sad. These are not the foods of my parents. These are not the foods of my ancestors. When I go to Cermak, yeah, I'm giving away some things like not eating as local potentially, but that's also the thing that fills me with joy. And so I, when I started doing some of the recipes in this book, there were things that just came to me. I don't know how to explain it, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but when I started roasting chile, so um, this is a picture that I got from Google on the left, but I smelled the way my house smelled. My house smelled the way my mom's house smelled. And I was like, and that's the way my grandmother's house smelled when you roast chiles. And that's the way her mother and her mother and her mother, that's the smells. And these are chiles that I can't find at Outpost. Right. So that wouldn't have worked for me in terms of decolonization. When I use certain tools, right, like the metate, the tortillera, I feel it. Like I feel like people before me have done this. It came again, it sounds a little cheesy, but like it just came so naturally to me to use these things. And so this one in the middle is a molcajete, a paste that I made using the molcajete, which I believe in English it's like a mortar and pestle. I'm not sure, like whatever it is that you break things down with. Um, and like I said, it just felt so natural and smelling those, right, as you smash things and the smells come at you, I just knew that's what I needed to be doing. Then some silly pictures of just like how happy I am holding some pears. On the right, you can see that's my stove and some of the things that I cooked for a lot of people. And to me, that's decolonization. Roasting the tomatoes, the chiles, making rice in a clay pot, right? All those things, making soup. I also wanted to share this funny one of look at my first tortilla that kind of fluffed up on the left. And then I made lentil soup with it and I enjoyed it. Right. So also some of these things, well, yeah. So yeah, it's a bit of it's a process, right? Some things I do well, some things not so well, but I'm learning, and that's part of decolonization and asking my mom, okay, why are my tortillas fluffing up? How come yours fluff up in just 5 seconds? And so learning from that. I wanted to go back to the book and share the recipes. So this is a purepecha bean soup, and it shares a little bit about the history of it and why it's so important that it's included in this book. And so the purepecha is an indigenous group that is still there in Michoacan, Mexico. And this is almost like an ode to them, right? They are some of the most incredible warriors, like physically in the past, but also warriors in terms of just fighting for indigenous sovereignty for land, and to take care of the land, not to claim land. That's included in the book as well. So yeah, I maybe have time for like a few questions if you have any. I know I went through this pretty fast, but I also included some of my favorite artwork related to food and decolonization.
Thank you so much, Yesenia. That I know you squeeze us into a very tight window of your day, and I really appreciate it.